The storm over Nerith Primus was not normal. It was the kind of storm that made even machines slow down and made every living thing hide. Snow did not fall gently. It slammed against the colony walls in fast, heavy waves. The lower transit ring looked almost abandoned, covered in white, cold air twisting around metal beams like claws. Frank Corrin drove his inspection rover through the storm. The engine growled under him, pushing forward through deep snow. The heater hummed inside the cabin, but the windows still froze at the corners. Frank checked his sensor panel again. Most nights, this long route was empty. Just steel, ice, and maybe a lonely maintenance drone flying home. Tonight felt different. He rolled his shoulders, trying to relax, but his body refused. Old training from his Marine days flickered back. The kind of feeling you get when something is wrong, even if you can't see it yet. He took a slow breath. He wanted a quiet night. No surprises. But Nerith Primus rarely gave people what they wanted. Then a small blinking dot appeared on his screen. Weak heat. Very weak. Not a machine. Not a drone. Not normal. Frank leaned closer. The signal pulsed in an uneven rhythm, almost gasping. It was too small to be a vehicle, too warm to be ice, and too still to be any kind of tool. His stomach tightened. Storm or not, he had to check. He turned off autopilot and guided the rover toward the maintenance gate. Harsh wind hit the front glass. Snow rattled against the metal frame like tiny stones. When he stopped the rover and opened the door, the cold slapped him hard, cutting through his jacket like it wanted to steal the air from his lungs. His boots sank deep into the snow. His shoulder lamp cut a thin path of light through the storm. He walked slowly, scanning every direction. The cold bit at his fingers and neck. Even breathing hurt. Then he saw something. A shape, half buried under ice. Too still, too soft, too human-shaped. Frank rushed forward, falling to his knees beside it. The light from his lamp revealed green skin, frozen, dull, almost gray. A woman. Alien. Her long white hair was stiff with frost, stuck to her chest and neck. A thin birth cloth covered her, torn in several places. Not enough to fight this deadly cold. 2 tiny bundles were tied to her chest in a weak sling. Newborns. Their pale green skin and small glowing freckles showed they were her children. They shivered violently, too weak to cry loudly. Frank felt anger hit him like fire. Someone put her here. Someone walked away. Someone expected her to die. He touched her neck. A pulse, thin and fading. One twin let out a soft, broken cry. Frank swallowed hard. "All right," he whispered. "I've got you." Without thinking twice, he ripped off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around all 3 of them. The cold stabbed his back instantly, but he ignored it. He lifted the mother and babies carefully, cradling them against him, shielding them from the storm. They were light, too light. He fought through the snow, reaching the rover. Once inside, warm air wrapped around them, fogging the windows. Steam rose from the woman's skin as the ice melted. Her breathing was uneven. The babies shook under the jacket, tiny fists curling. "Stay with me," Frank said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, amber eyes filled with fear. "Don't take them," she whispered. "I won't," Frank said. "You're safe now." Her eyes closed again. Frank gripped the controls and pushed the rover forward fast. He didn't care about rules. He didn't care who tried to stop him. A mother and her newborns had been left to die in the snow. Not while he was alive. The storm kept pounding the rover as Frank drove toward the emergency clinic. Snow slapped the windows in wild, sharp lines, making it hard to see anything besides white and shadows. Frank kept one hand tight on the controls and the other gently pressed against the jacket-wrapped mother beside him. He could feel her shaking through the fabric. The twins made small, weak sounds, trying to breathe. "Hold on," he whispered, voice low but steady. "Just a little longer." The clinic lights finally appeared through the storm. Tall, cold blue bars glowing like distant lighthouses. Frank's jaw tightened. He knew what those lights meant. Help, mixed with rules, questions, and problems. He drove straight into the emergency dock. Warm air blasted inside as the doors opened. Clinic staff turned sharply, surprised to see a man carrying a green-skinned mother and 2 newborn babies wrapped in his own jacket. "We need help," Frank said louder now. "Severe cold exposure. She's fading fast." A scanning arch above the door activated automatically, washing them in a blue glow. The machine beeped once, then again, louder. A red screen flashed. Unregistered. No medical credit. A clerk rushed over with a tablet held close to her chest. Her voice was flat, robotic. Sir, she does not qualify for emergency care. We can place her in temporary. Frank stepped forward, eyes sharp. No. Override it. The clerk blinked. I can't. Use my account. But sir. Do it. His voice hit the room like a shockwave. Staff exchanged nervous looks. Frank's eyes didn't move. He had seen officers hesitate like this in battle zones. He knew how to break that hesitation. The clerk finally tapped the screen. Red changed to yellow. Then yellow to green. Access granted, the scanner announced. Only then did the medical team move. They lifted the woman onto a stretcher and settled each baby into a tiny warming crib. The weak cries grew a little louder as the heat touched their skin. That alone felt like a victory. As they rushed her down the hallway, one of her hands slipped from the blanket. Her fingers brushed Frank's wrist. Her eyes opened for a heartbeat, full of fear. Don't let them take my babies. I won't, he said, voice firm. I promise. The doors closed behind her. Frank stayed standing in the hallway, breathing hard. Melted snow dripped from his hair and jacket. The storm outside still growled against the clinic walls, but inside everything felt quiet, too quiet. He took a chair outside the treatment room and sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. He was soaked, cold, and exhausted, but he didn't move. He wasn't going anywhere. After what felt like a long time, a nurse came out. Her face was tight. Her temperature is rising, she said. She's extremely weak. Malnourished. The babies are cold, but responding well to heat. She hesitated. You said you found her outside the colony walls. Half buried in snow, Frank answered. The nurse's jaw clenched. She didn't ask anything else. She simply nodded and returned inside. Frank rubbed a hand over his face. The heat pads warmed the air, but fury simmered in his chest. Someone had left this woman, left 2 newborn babies, to die. For what? Because she didn't have credits? Because she didn't have the right paperwork? He leaned his head back against the cold wall. His breath shook for a moment before he controlled it. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but the instinct to protect someone vulnerable was still carved deep inside him. Finally, the treatment bay doors slid open. A soft light spilled into the hallway. You can come in now, the nurse said. Frank stepped inside slowly. The room was warm, quiet, calm. Machines blinked softly. The twins slept in small heated cribs, their tiny hands curled near their faces. The mother lay on a narrow bed, wrapped in a thick thermal sheet. Her green skin was no longer dull. A faint glow had returned to her cheeks. Her long white hair had been dried and brushed back over one shoulder. She looked fragile, but alive. Frank let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down. She didn't wake, but her fingers twitched slightly under the blanket, as if reaching for her children even in sleep. Frank leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. I've got you, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. All of you. The storm roared outside, hitting the walls like a warning. But inside this room, for the first time tonight, everything felt warm. The quiet inside the treatment room felt almost unreal after the chaos outside. Machines beeped softly. Warm air flowed gently from the vents. The twins slept in their heated cribs, their small chests rising and falling in steady little breaths. Frank stayed in his chair for a long moment, letting the calm sink in. His clothes were still damp from melted snow, and cold air clung to his hair and sleeves, but he didn't care. He had only one thought in his mind. They're alive. That was enough. Then the woman stirred. Her fingers moved first, curling weakly under the blanket. Her breathing shifted. Slowly, very slowly, her eyes opened. They were amber, soft, and filled with confusion. She looked around the room, blinking as if unsure this warmth was real. Then her gaze snapped to the cribs. She tried to sit up too fast. Pain shot through her body, making her gasp. Frank leaned forward, hands ready, but waited until she steadied herself before touching anything. They're okay, he said gently. The babies. They're safe. Her eyes darted back to the cribs. She let out a shaky breath, almost a silent sob. Her shoulders relaxed a little, though fear still sat heavy in her expression. They didn't take them, she whispered. No, Frank replied. I didn't let anyone move them away from you. Some of the tension left her face, replaced with exhaustion. She pulled the blanket slightly higher, covering the torn birth cloth beneath it. Her long white hair slid over her shoulder as she looked at him again, this time more clearly. Why? She asked. Her voice cracked. Why would a human help us? Frank took a breath before answering. He didn't want to scare her with the truth of how angry he felt about what had been done to her. I saw a heat signal out there, he said simply. I went to check, and I wasn't going to leave you in the snow. That is duty, she murmured. But you did more. Frank shook his head. You were dying. The babies were freezing. Anyone with a heart would have done the same. She held his gaze for a long moment. Her eyes softened. Not trust. Not yet, but something close to it. Something that could grow. What happened? Frank asked quietly. Why were you out there? Her breath hitched. Her hands tightened on the blanket. They pushed me out, she whispered. The clinic where I gave birth. They said I had no partner in the system. No family credit. No registered support. They called me unnecessary burden. Frank clenched his jaw. He had seen bureaucracy do cruel things, but throwing a mother and 2 newborns into a snowstorm felt beyond cruel. It felt evil. They removed my name from the registry, she continued. Security took me to the door. They told me the cold would be quick, and then they locked the gate. Her voice broke. Frank didn't move at first. Rage burned through him like a slow fire, steady and dangerous. He wanted to find the people responsible. He wanted to tear down whatever rulebook had allowed this. But right now, she didn't need anger. She needed calm. She needed reassurance. Not everyone here is like that, he said softly. You're safe now. Her eyes glistened. She swallowed hard. The smaller twin made a faint, hungry noise. Instantly, the woman moved, reaching toward the crib but wincing in pain as her body failed to support her. I've got him, Frank said. He stood, lifted the baby gently, and brought him to her. Her arms opened, shaking but eager. When the child rested against her chest, her entire body seemed to melt into relief. He is warm, she whispered, pressing her cheek to the baby's head. You saved him. And the other one, Frank said, glancing at the second crib. They're both fighters. She looked at him again, really looked. This time, her expression held something he hadn't seen before, gratitude that didn't fit into words. What is your name? She asked. Frank, he answered. Frank Corin. She nodded slowly. I am Ilera. The name suited her. Strong and soft at once. Silence settled again. A warm silence. A fragile one. Then the door slid open, and a clinic administrator walked in, holding a digital slate. Her voice was cold, almost polite. Mr. Corin, she said, avoiding Ilera's eyes. Your authorization for her care has been processed. You understand this means all responsibility, medical, housing, and resources, falls to you now. Frank didn't hesitate. I understand. The administrator nodded and left. Ilera stared at him, stunned. You accepted all that? For me? For us? Frank leaned back in his chair. Yeah, he said quietly. I did. Ilera held her baby close, tears finally slipping down her cheeks, falling onto the tiny blanket. For the first time since being thrown into the snow, she looked like someone who believed she might survive. And Frank knew one thing for sure. He was not letting the system hurt her again. The clinic room grew quieter as night settled deeper into the building. The storm outside still pushed against the walls, but inside everything felt warm, slow, and strangely peaceful. Ilera held one twin close to her chest, eyes half closed from exhaustion. The other baby slept calmly in the small heated crib beside her. Frank had not stepped out of the room even once. He sat in the chair beside her bed, elbows on his knees, watching the rise and fall of the baby's tiny breaths. Hours had passed since he'd brought them in, but the memory of finding them frozen in the snow still burned sharply in his mind. When he finally stood, Ilera's eyes opened slightly. You are leaving? She whispered. Just downstairs. To get food, Frank said. Something warm. Not clinic packets. She blinked slowly, as if unsure such a simple kindness could be real. You are coming back? Yes, he answered without thinking. I'm not going anywhere. She watched him leave, her face a mixture of fear and hope. Frank returned 15 minutes later, carrying 2 steaming containers. The warm smell filled the room as soon as he stepped in. Meat stew, heavy broth, something spiced. Ilera sat up taller when she saw him. The blanket wrapped around her legs, and both babies nestled against her chest under the thermal sheet. You came back, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I said I would. He pulled the small table closer and opened one container. Steam rose in a soft wave. This cost credits, she murmured. So I paid for it, he replied. Eat. She took the spoon slowly, like she was afraid someone would grab it away. The first bite was tiny. The second was bigger. By the third, the lines around her eyes softened. Warmth spread through her face, returning some color to her skin. They didn't give me real food for days, she admitted quietly. Only nutrient gel, the same kind they feed the storage animals. Frank's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Instead, he opened his own container and ate without making a show of it. It was thick stew, salty, and full of soft vegetables. He hadn't realized how hungry he was either. The twins shifted against her. Illyra adjusted them gently, her arms moving with a natural skill, protective but tired. They said you accepted full responsibility, Illyra said after a few bites. Medical, housing, everything. Yeah, Frank answered simply. Why? Her voice trembled. You don't know me. You needed someone, Frank said. And I was there. She stared at him as if the answer made no sense, yet somehow meant everything. They will need formula, she said suddenly, glancing at the babies. The clinic's supply will not last. I'll get some, Frank said. Tonight. You are staying? Through the night? She asked. Yes. Her breath shook as she nodded, a mix of relief and disbelief. She took another spoonful of stew, slower now, her body finally absorbing warmth and comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Frank cleared the containers once they were empty. Illyra looked stronger, but still fragile, as if one wrong word could make her crumble. The babies slept, tiny hands curled near their faces. I used to work as a resonance surveyor, Illyra said quietly, for off-world sound mapping. They needed me then. When the twins came, everything changed. They saw me as noise. Frank understood the pain in her voice. He'd heard similar tones from soldiers thrown aside after injuries. The system always found a way to discard people it considered inconvenient. We'll figure out something else, Frank said. Illyra looked at him quickly, as if she had misheard. We? He nodded. She let out a soft breath, part surprise, part relief. She looked down at her babies, brushing a thumb across one small, glowing temple. I don't know how to repay you, she whispered. You don't owe me anything, Frank said. Just get better. A long, calm silence settled between them. The heat lamp made the room glow softly. The twins made tiny sleeping noises. Illyra finally leaned back, resting her head against the pillow. I can try to sleep, she murmured. If you are here. I'm here, Frank said, pulling the chair closer. Rest. For the first time since the storm swallowed her, Illyra allowed her eyes to fully close. The twins pressed close to her chest, breathing softly. Her tense shoulders eased, her face softened, and she finally drifted into real sleep. Frank watched the door, arms crossed, alert. He wasn't tired, not yet. Someone had thrown this woman into the snow like she was disposable. But he had decided something the moment he picked her up. No one was going to hurt her or those children again. Not while he was breathing. Morning came slowly to the clinic. A gray, soft light filtered through the frosted window, turning the room pale and calm. The storm outside had finally weakened. Thin lines of melting ice ran down the glass, dripping like quiet reminders of the long night. Frank woke with a stiff neck and sore shoulders. He had slept in the chair again, arms folded across his chest, boots planted on the floor like he expected an alarm to go off at any moment. It wasn't comfortable, but he didn't regret it. He turned his head toward the bed. Illyra was still asleep. She lay curled slightly on her side, the heavy blanket he'd bought wrapped around her and both babies. The twins were tucked between her arms and chest, their tiny breaths fogging the blanket where their faces rested. Her long white hair flowed across the pillow, glowing faintly in the warm light. Frank stood slowly, stretching out the stiffness in his back. As he adjusted the heat lamp above her, Illyra stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered. Then she opened her eyes, soft amber, tired but no longer filled with fear. You didn't leave, she murmured. Didn't plan to, Frank said. She checked the twins instantly. They slept peacefully, tiny hands curled near their faces. One made a small hiccup sound. Illyra adjusted him carefully, wincing at the soreness in her arms and abdomen. They'll be hungry soon, she said. Frank was already picking up a formula pack. I've got it. He warmed it in the portable sleeve. She watched closely, her eyes following every motion, like she wanted to memorize something she'd never seen before. When he handed the warmed pack to her, their fingers brushed. Her skin felt warmer now, alive. She fed the first baby slowly. His small hands pressed weakly against her chest as he drank. A tiny sound escaped his throat, soft, but strong enough to make her eyes water. "You saved their lives," she said quietly. "Seems like they're doing most of the work," Frank replied. She shook her head. "No. Without you, they would not be breathing." Frank didn't answer. Compliments were harder to accept than storms. When the baby finished, Illyra gently lifted the second twin, who was already waking with tiny, hungry cries. Frank prepared another pack. The room felt warm, almost peaceful, like a small island in a hostile world. After both twins drifted back to sleep, Illyra rested against the pillows. She looked exhausted, but stronger than yesterday. A soft chime sounded at the door. A nurse entered with a small pad in her hands. "You'll be discharged today," she said. "Paperwork is almost done. A few final checks, and you can leave with Mr. Corn." Illyra stiffened slightly. Leaving meant stepping back into a world that had tried to kill her. When the nurse left, she turned to Frank. "Where do we go?" she asked, voice soft. "My apartment," Frank said. "It's not big, but it's warm. Safe. No one's going to push you out." Illyra lowered her gaze. "I have never lived with a human." "We'll figure it out," Frank said. "Simple rules. A bed, heat, food, doors that stay shut unless you open them." She swallowed hard, eyes shimmering. "You make it sound easy." "It will be," he said calmly. "One step at a time." She hesitated again. "And your neighbors? They will ask questions." "They might," Frank said. "And I'll answer for you." Illyra stared at him for a long moment. There was fear in her eyes, but for the first time, there was also trust. Not complete trust, but something small and growing. Frank picked up the clinic-approved bag on the counter, the same bag that held nothing but a thin cloth and a few disposable wraps. He hated how empty it was. "You'll need real clothes," he said. "Something warm. We'll stop at the supply market after you're settled." Illyra touched the corner of the blanket around her shoulders. "I have nothing." "You will," Frank said. Silence fell again, but it wasn't cold. The baby slept peacefully. The heat lamp glowed softly across the room. Illyra finally let out a slow breath and leaned back against the pillows. "Frank," she said quietly, "if you had not found me, I would have died. My children would have died." "Yeah," he said softly, "but I did find you." Her eyes softened, bright with something fragile, gratitude, maybe, or hope. Outside, the storm clouds began to break apart, letting pale light spill across Nerith Primus. Inside the clinic room, a mother and her newborns were alive, warm, and no longer alone. And Frank knew. He was responsible now, not because the system forced him, but because he had chosen them. The discharge process moved slowly, as if the clinic itself didn't want to let go of its rules. Illyra sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in Frank's dark shirt and the heavy blue blanket he'd bought. Her hair fell over her shoulders in long white strands, no longer stiff with frost, but still showing the signs of exhaustion. Frank held both twins in the clinic carrier, checking the straps twice. Their tiny breaths warmed the cloth against his chest. "You ready?" he asked gently. Illyra's fingers tightened around the blanket. She looked toward the door, the same door where she had been rejected from another clinic just hours earlier. "I think so," she whispered. Frank nodded, knowing the step she was about to take wasn't small. It was leaving behind terror, cold, and memories of being pushed outside to die. They walked slowly down the hallway. Illyra's steps were careful, but steady. The clinic lights flickered slightly above them, buzzing in a way that made everything feel colder despite the warmth inside the building. A few staff members watched from behind their desks. No one spoke. No one dared to. When they reached the elevator, Illyra stood very still. The metal doors reflected her face, pale green skin, tired eyes, hair drifting softly in the warm air. She barely looked like the frozen woman Frank had found buried in snow. "You don't have to be afraid," Frank said. "I'm not afraid," she replied softly. "Just not used to doors that open for me." The elevator chimed, and they stepped inside. The doors closed with a quiet hiss, sealing them in a small, humming space. Illyra watched the numbers above the door climb downward. "This is strange," she murmured. "Going somewhere I wasn't meant to survive to see." Frank didn't know what to say, so he stood close, letting his presence speak for him. The elevator doors opened into the loading bay. A blast of cold air swept in, pushing at them like an unwelcome reminder of the night before. The bay was wide and almost empty, metal walls shining under pale lights. In the distance, small snow drifts moved like living shadows, carried by the fading wind. Illyra pulled the blanket tighter. Frank stepped ahead, scanning the corners out of habit. Old training. Old instincts. Still sharp. Come on, he said. The rover's close. They walked down the ramp. Illyra stayed near his side, not touching him, but matching his pace. Her bare legs were wrapped mostly by the blanket, but the cold still nipped at her skin. She didn't complain. Frank unlocked the rover. Lights blinked twice. The engine warmed with a soft growl. He opened the passenger door. Sit. I'll take the twins. She hesitated only a moment before handing them over. Her arms shook, not from fear, but from the strange experience of trusting someone else with her children. Frank lifted the babies with steady hands. They're okay, he assured her. I know, she whispered, though her eyes followed every movement. Inside, the rover's warm air hit her immediately. She closed her eyes for a second, breathing in the heat as if it were something sacred. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and legs again. Frank settled the twins beside her, securing their carrier. You always check things twice, she said quietly. It's a habit, he replied. The rover pulled into the inspection lane. Snow melted on the windshield, sliding in soft trails. The city slowly rose around them. Large towers, high walkways, vents releasing warm steam into the air. Nerith Primus was waking up. Illyra watched it all with wide eyes. It looks different from inside a vehicle, she murmured. Safer, Frank replied. Yes, she whispered. Safer. They passed through narrower roads. Vendors were setting up food stalls. Workers rushed across walkways. No one looked too closely at the alien woman in a human man's rover, holding her newborn twins. Illyra shifted. Will your neighbors speak against this? They might, Frank said honestly. But if they do, they won't repeat it. She searched his face, studying the calm confidence there. You are unusual for a human, she said. Frank smirked faintly. You'll get used to it. They turned down a quieter lane. Older buildings stood close together, their metal frames patched and repaired. A warm haze drifted from steam vents, softening the harsh lines of the district. That building, Frank said, nodding ahead. Lower Spire 12. Illyra stared through the window as they approached. Her heart beat faster. This wasn't just a building. This was the first place on Nerith Primus that wasn't trying to erase her. The rover stopped in the reserved bay. Frank turned off the engine and faced her. You don't have to rush, he said quietly. Illyra nodded, breathing in deeply. She wasn't stepping into danger. Not this time. She was stepping into a future she never thought she would reach. Frank stepped out first, then came around to open her door. He held out his hand. Illyra placed her palm in his. Together, they walked toward the secure entry. A human man, an alien mother, and two tiny lives who had already survived the impossible. The door to Lower Spire 12 opened with a heavy click, and warm air rushed out to greet them. Illyra stepped inside slowly, her bare feet touching the clean floor with a kind of disbelief. After so much cold, so much fear, her body seemed unsure how to react to comfort. Frank followed her in, carrying the twins with careful hands. The hallway was narrow but warm, lit by soft amber panels that hummed gently. A quiet calm lived here, different from the cold clinic and the loud storm. No guards, no scanners, no red lights flashing unregistered. Just a simple path forward. They reached Frank's apartment door. He pressed his thumb to the lock. The panel beeped once, recognizing him. The door slid open. Go ahead, he said. Illyra hesitated only a moment, then stepped in. The apartment wasn't large. 2 rooms, a small kitchen strip, and a long window overlooking the Lower Spire lights. But it felt real. Lived in. Safe. A warm lamp on the counter. A folded blanket on the couch. A small heater vent humming softly under the window. Nothing fancy, but everything she needed. It is warm, Illyra whispered. Frank set the twins on the couch in the carrier. They stirred a little, but stayed asleep, tiny hands curled like leaves. You can rest, Frank said. You're safe here. Illyra moved slowly, touching the wall with her fingers, then the back of the couch, then the blanket. Everything felt foreign to her. Alien, but warm. Kind. I have never been inside a human home, she said softly. It's not complicated, he replied. He opened a cabinet and took out a cup, filling it with warm water from the heating unit. Steam rose in quiet swirls. He handed it to her. She took it carefully, as if it might be taken away at any second. "Drink," he said. "You're dehydrated." She sipped, her hands shaking just a little. Frank watched her for a moment. Then he moved around the room with slow, steady motions, adjusting the heater, making space on the table, pulling an extra blanket from a shelf. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was preparing a home for someone who had never had one. Illyra sat on the couch beside the twins. Her legs were still weak, but now she sat because she wanted to, not because she was collapsing. The babies breathed softly, their glow faint but steady. "You did all this," she murmured. "For us." "I said I wouldn't leave you in the snow," Frank replied. She looked at him with a long, searching gaze. For the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, only confusion and something gentler beneath it. "You do not act like the others," she said. "Other humans, they look at me with disgust, or fear, or nothing at all. But you look at me like I am someone." "You are someone," Frank said. "A mother, a survivor. And those 2-inch," he nodded at the twins, "are going to grow up because you fought through hell." Her throat tightened. She looked down, blinking hard. "I don't know how to start a life," she whispered. "Not here. Not anywhere. We'll start small," Frank said. "Food, clothes, a place to sleep. After that, one day at a time." Illyra gently brushed her finger across one baby's cheek. Her hand still trembled, but now from emotion, not weakness. "And if the colony questions this?" she asked quietly. "If someone says I cannot stay?" Frank leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Then I'll handle it," he said. "You won't face them alone." Something inside her broke, not in pain, but in release. Like a heavy weight finally letting go. She wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "I never thought a human would save me." Frank shook his head. It wasn't about species. It was about right and wrong. Outside the window, the storm clouds drifted apart. Weak sunlight slipped through the buildings, landing softly across the couch where Illyra and her twins lay wrapped in warmth. The colony didn't know it yet, but something had changed that night. Not because a rule was broken, not because a system was challenged, but because one human chose to act when no one else did. A tired Marine who no longer wanted to fight found himself fighting again. For a mother left to die, for 2 newborns who never asked to suffer, and for a future he hadn't expected to share. Illyra looked at him one last time before resting her head against the cushion. "You saved us," she whispered. Frank gave a small nod. "Yeah, and I'm not done." The heater hummed. The twins breathed softly. The storm faded. Inside that small apartment in Lower Spire 12, a strange family began to form. Quiet, fragile, but real. And in the heart of Nerith Primus, one human proved again why the galaxy never underestimated humanity. When humans decide to protect someone, they do it completely.